Leonardo were alive today, he'd be hacking robots, hopefully with the robot group.
Leonardo would have understood perfectly what was going on here, because all of this starts with the same material that he had, a piece of paper and a pencil and sketches.
Leonardo could walk into this hangar and feel right at home.
These things, of course, would never fly, you know, but he got the right notion when it came to the helicopter. It was just the principle of mechanics that he was illustrating, as if he was fully aware of the fact that only posterity could carry out his idea.
Consider this. The whirlybird we call a helicopter, the magical flying machine of the 20th century, was envisioned here in the hills of Tuscany 500 years ago. It was a dream of the original Renaissance man. Hi, I'm Lucky Severson. We're going to be doing some exploring during this special edition of Invention. We're going to marvel at the genius and vision of a most remarkable man from Vinci. His name was Leonardo.
He always had something more to contribute, you see. He was always one step ahead, at least in vision. And besides, he had this something that nobody else had, and it was the way to communicate visually, drawing, you see. That's unsurpassed.
We know him best as the artist who painted the portrait of the woman with the mysterious smile. But Leonardo's legacy extends well beyond the dozen or so of his paintings that exist today. Leonardo da Vinci was also an inventor, engineer, architect, and scientist who left a remarkable record of his genius. 10,000 pages of notebooks filled with writings and drawings on every conceivable subject, passed down to us through 5 centuries. Leonardo was left-handed, and he wrote backwards. His words can be read in a mirror.
On the same page, we might see a shopping list: bread, wine, meat, fish, cheese, to be purchased that day. And at the same time, designs for a flying machine or a cannon for war.
Alessandro Fiesole is a Leonardo scholar who lives in Vinci.
Then we find in these millions of pages, which are really infinite, things so simple they are almost infantile, along with deep philosophical reflections. We also find terrible fits of anger. He writes terrible things, blasphemous and abusive, often crude and vulgar, next to an angelic face of the Madonna.
But there is more than meets the eye with Leonardo, you know. And that's the subtlety of the things. And I think in order to do justice to that, one has to experience the places in which he lived, in which he produced, he worked, you know. And to begin with, the place where he was born. And this is the place where he was born.
Carlo Pedretti has studied Leonardo for a lifetime. His home near Vinci overlooks Leonardo's birthplace.
That's as close as one can get to him, of course, right there. 5 kilometers. He was born just behind that ridge there. That's Leonardo's road. You see, it looks like the road in the Mona Lisa. This is the road from Vinci to Pistoia. And it goes all the way up there. And it's a very commanding landscape, I tell you. I think Leonardo was born in the right place. The birth of Leonardo at Vinci was recorded by his paternal grandfather.
On Saturday at 10 o'clock at night, on April 15th, 1452, a grandson of mine was born. He was named Leonardo.
It was here that Leonardo grew up. Vinci remains a small Italian country town built on a hilltop in Tuscany, surrounded by olive groves and grape vineyards. Leonardo's parents were not married. His mother was a young peasant girl, his father a notary, who worked for Lorenzo de' Medici, the most powerful man in the great city of Florence, not far from Vinci.
Vinci was a small town, though not isolated from the rest of the world. There were many artists working in Vinci and the surrounding area. Because his father was a lawyer for the Medici, Da Vinci's life was divided between a small rural community of farmers and a highly educated, cultivated world of Florence, where everything was meant to leave a legacy of art.
It was in these rolling hills of Tuscany that Leonardo developed a love of nature and a capacity to see beyond a landscape to its tiniest detail. Images of the natural world, many from his childhood, can be seen throughout his life's work.
The first known drawing by Leonardo, done at the age of 21 in 1473, it's precisely taken from this spot. And it's been defined as the first pure landscape in the history of art.
The farms and vineyards of Tuscany, among the most productive in the world, used primitive 15th century tools that captured the imagination of Leonardo. His notebooks are filled with attempts to understand and improve the farming technology of his time.
Leonardo finds tools, sometimes very sophisticated ones linked to art, other times very simple and primitive, like the yoke, scythe, hoe, and spade, and modifies them, transforming them into complex instruments. Because he was an artist, he loved to dream and worked to transform simple machines into complex ones that sometimes looked like robots. Leonardo thought of a machine that was designed to grind grains, which would also grind the colors for his paints, never forgetting that he was an artist.
We are rediscovering someone who has always been with us. And I think this is the dimension most exciting in the study of Leonardo. The more you study, the more you realize that he's next to you. Is someone who is still able to talk to us. This is fascinating to see how many are touched by Leonardo today, still today, indeed.
One of those touched by Leonardo is Roberto Vescovi, a local bus driver. 6 mornings a week, he can be found winding through the back roads of Tuscany. On Sundays, he follows the dream of Leonardo. The wings on this ultralight plane, called the Leonardone, are based on the original wing designs of Leonardo da Vinci.
They are machines that give the real sensation of flying, of having wings attached, as Leonardo dreamt of, because you were practically on top of an aluminum bar. It was nicknamed the flying broomstick because you were really in the open. Once you reach the desired altitude, you can leave the commands alone and let your legs go and enjoy the complete sensation of flying, practically the flight of a bird. And Leonardo, I believe, with the designs he had made, thought himself free, in the air, like a bird.
It's the spirit of the place. He's everywhere. In the people, in the trees, in the mist, hence in the mystery.
Approximately 45 kilometers from Vinci, a whole new world for Leonardo, the capital of Tuscany, filled with art and culture and an abundance of wealth. An enticing city for any young man seeking his fame and fortune. Florence.
We are in the heart of the city where Leonardo lived from age 17 to age 30, and where his mastership and ideas were formed.
Idanna Pucci's ancestors, among the leading families of Florence, worked closely with Leonardo's patrons, the Medicis.
And I can imagine Leonardo arriving as a young apprentice in the workshop of Verrocchio.
Leonardo spent his first years in the workshop of Verrocchio, who was regarded as the greatest artist, sculptor, goldsmith, and engineer of the day. Lost in time in the same neighborhoods of Florence, artisan studios, very much like Verrocchio's, still exist. It was from such workshops that the most important figures of the Renaissance emerged: Botticelli, Raphael, Michelangelo, the artists and craftsmen who added to the glory and beauty of Florence.
I think he's a phenomenon, a great phenomenon, phenomenon of nature. Few phenomenon of that kind exist, I don't think. Very few are born.
These artisans learned their craft just as Leonardo did 500 years ago.
I bow down before Leonardo, one of those revered figures. Of course he was a great artisan. The artisan must be able to invent, design, and construct. That is the complete artisan, the artisan of the Renaissance.
This statue of David by Verrocchio is believed to be the young Leonardo. According to a 16th century biographer, he was blonde, blue-eyed, and quite handsome.
It's a face that sums up the ideals of 15th century Florence. That's Leonardo living in his time as a young man.
One of Leonardo's first projects after arriving in Florence was helping to place an extremely large and heavy gilded copper sphere on top of the cupola of Florence's most majestic cathedral.
8 people can fit inside, and you can actually go up there. Nobody knows how it has managed to remain up there for so many years, nor how it was installed.
The entire city of Florence turned out to watch the great golden sphere hoisted 100 meters above the ground, an unprecedented merging of art and engineering. This was the richest city of its time, a financial capital unmatched for centuries. Lorenzo de' Medici and other powerful Florentines spent lavishly on art, filling the city with statues and paintings.
Most people, when they think of the Renaissance and the great wealth of Florence, they think of banking. But actually, it became a banking power as a result of the cloth. These colors, the crimson, the red, the blue, these are Renaissance colors. These are the colors of the paintings.
Leonardo quickly achieved fame in Florence as an artist, but his fascination with technology continued, now focusing on the tools of the city's vital textile trade. His designs included machines that made sequins for ladies' dresses. This one produced gold sequins.
He invented the concept of automation, getting down to details of how many, for instance, pins he could produce in a day. There was always a practical motivation behind his inventions.
His design for a silk threading machine is in use today, still run by foot. It can be found in a factory in Florence, located in the historic district of the Weavers. It's operated by Carla Giovanni. Her family has been in the weaving trade for generations.
I think it is something that goes back centuries, at least 2 centuries. It was designed in antiquity, in the time of Leonardo. And if it was made to work properly, and I think it was because Leonardo was our genius.
Leonardo studied the luxurious materials produced by the silk weavers.
He did so many studies, and there are so many drawings of Leonardo's just on the way pleats fall. There is a painting of the Annunciation, which you have a remarkable example of the gown of the Madonna, and it could have been this one. It could have been exactly this one, you know, because these materials, silks, they fall in a very, this silk here will fall in a completely different way of this one. And Leonardo must have held these things in his hand and put them there and really studied the way these materials form themselves.
He wanted to know everything because that was his business. He was a painter. He was representing what he was seeing, and what is seen has to be known.
As a leading artist, Leonardo was a frequent guest at the palazios and villas of Florence. Years later, he would experience a different side of this city, slipping away at night to the local hospital, where he would dissect human cadavers, studying anatomy and drawing his remarkably accurate pictures of the human body.
What made him take a body apart? What made him do any of the many things that he experimented with, like a child? What's going on, says he. He just didn't believe what he was told. He kept probing and exploring.
Jonas Salk, discoverer of the first polio vaccine, found inspiration in Leonardo for his own explorations.
What was characteristic of those like Da Vinci was their ability, both as artists and scientists.
He lived in an age of great minds, of great engineers, of great practitioners, but he had always something more to contribute.
Leonardo was a man full of grand ideas, supremely self-confident, and he was a pretty good salesman. His plan for the baptistry of San Giovanni here in Florence revealed all these traits. He wanted to raise this massive structure of stone and marble by adding several steps underneath it without damaging the building. What he proposed was to dig down deep, clearly exposing the foundation of the building, and then constructing underneath it a platform that would be raised by using huge screws. all turning simultaneously. His reason for wanting to do it? Aesthetics. He thought the square would look better with the base of the baptistry at the same height as the cathedral across the way. He presented his proposal to the leaders of Florence so convincingly, they actually thought it was possible, though they later reconsidered and decided not to go ahead with the Leonardo plan.
At the moment he turned his back, then everybody realized that it was an impossible feat, of course. Right? That's a beauty. That's what fascinates, you see. I remember that this is the sort of thing that as a child I was reading, and that's what really triggered this kind of passion of going after the man who, soon enough, I realized was still alive.
The powerful city of Milan in northern Italy became Leonardo's next home. An accomplished musician, he arrived in Milan with a silver lyre for the city's ruler. Here's what Leonardo found when he arrived in Milan in 1482. This immense fortress belonging to the Duke of Milan, Ludovico Sforza. From the city of flowers to the city of power. Another world to conquer. This one depending on military might and engineering genius. This one virtually impenetrable. Inside the outer wall, the Plaza of the Army, capable of accommodating 3,500 men-at-arms. And if that wasn't enough, another moat, protecting yet another fortified entrance. This one leading to the Duke's official residence, his base of operations. Fortress within a fortress. It was here that Leonardo wanted a job as a military engineer. He calculated, we assume, that the Duke of Milan had greater need for military engineers than for artists.
I have plans of bridges, very light and strong. I have plans for destroying every fortress.
In a letter to the Duke, Leonardo described his qualifications for the job.
I have also plans of mortars most convenient. I will make covered cars, safe and unassailable, which will enter among the enemy. In short, I shall contrive endless means of attack and defense.
And he concluded,
in time of peace, I can give perfect satisfaction in architecture, sculpture in marble, bronze, or clay, and also I can do in painting whatever can be done as well as any other.
Leonardo got the job. He would work for the mighty Duke of Milan for the next 17 years, designing, among other things, war machines.
You know, it was called the art of war in those days. So it was a form of art.
Many Renaissance artists were employed as military engineers, including Michelangelo. Leonardo's unsurpassed ability to draw made him invaluable for designing fortifications and armaments. Wars were fought by knights in armor and foot soldiers. With their bristling spears, the men came crashing together and attempted to push and gouge each other off the battlefield. As these drawings of Leonardo show, there wasn't much in the way of military hardware. Leonardo wanted to revolutionize warfare with his machines. Military historian Richard Stewart says he was on the right track with his design for an armored car, what we call the tank.
He was coming up with the same solution that we've come up with in the 20th century. A mobile, armored, fire-oriented shock type of weapon which could sweep all before it and be the definitive breakthrough type weapon on the battlefield.
Leonardo's tank would have used 8 men to fire its cannons and turn these cranks to power its small wheels. 400 years went by before anyone actually fielded a tank in battle. It was 1916. Just as Leonardo predicted, the tanks shocked the enemy. Another original Leonardo idea was his giant crossbow system. One man would sit inside the large wheel. As others turned it, he would fire off one crossbow after another. An interesting idea with a few significant problems.
But dragging that cumbersome machine onto the battlefield, having men stand up on top of the wheel behind a shield and pedal the thing, he ran into the problems of his time. There was no power source, there was no internal combustion engine.
To test the feasibility of other Leonardo inventions, Carlo Pedretti, with the help of architect Marco Berni, is recreating Leonardo's 15th century drawings on this 20th century computer.
Now, with the help of the computer, we are in the position to produce something very convincing in terms of interpretation of a Leonardo idea.
Leonardo's original drawings are entered into the computer, taking into account his written notes. It is then possible to test the feasibility of his ideas. Leonardo's most ambitious bridge proposal was for a single span linking Europe and Asia, a bridge across the Golden Horn.
And Leonardo's intentions are committed to paper in a tiny, pocket-sized notebook. So what has been tested with the computer is the validity of Leonardo's conception. When I view a Leonardo's notebook, such as this one, which contains the essence of everything that is inside this machine now, you see, then I like to think of this one as a chip of Leonardo's brain, you see. A chip handed over centuries, 5 centuries has come down to us. For us to actually put it into the machines, almost literally.
Bridge projects were expensive, even in the Renaissance, and ferries were used everywhere. Leonardo designed a ferry, like this one on a river near Milan, that uses only the current of the water to propel itself. The operator adjusts the angle of the hulls so the current pushes the boat in one direction along the fixed cable. For the return trip, he simply reverses the angle. The ferry, which uses only the river's natural flow, would be appreciated by modern environmentalists. Rivers and extensive canal systems moved the merchandise of the Renaissance. Leonardo redesigned the angle of canal lock gates and invented new dredges. Milan was built around canals. When Duke Sforza asked Leonardo to redesign the city, canals were a central part of his plan.
What he comes up is with a very systematic type of arrangement of houses running by canals, and with gardens, something that's strikingly similar to something that we would see today.
Along with his other extraordinary talents, Leonardo was also an architect, an urban planner. He designed not only cathedrals and military fortifications, he had plans for the ideal city, a design he believed would eliminate the spread of the deadly disease known as Black Death. It was the late 1400s, and the city of Milan was being ravaged by bubonic plague. Tens of thousands of people, almost a third of the population, died. Leonardo envisioned a two-level, wide-open city built along the banks of a river, crisscrossed by canals. Water from these canals would provide transport and could be used to irrigate gardens and wash the streets. He devised gutters along the pavements and had specific designs for the disposal of waste. It was a revolutionary proposal, but unfortunately, like so many of Leonardo's designs, this one was ahead of its time. By the end of the 15th century, Leonardo was out of a steady job. His longtime employer, the Duke of Milan, defeated and imprisoned by the French. He summed up his time in Milan with this simple observation: none of the works were ever completed. For the next 20 years, Leonardo traveled through Italy offering his services to patrons and military leaders, once advising the city of Florence in a bold scheme to defeat neighboring Pisa. His plan indulged his fascination with water. He proposed diverting 7 miles of the river Arno away from Pisa, depriving the town of its water supply and harbor. It was a brilliant idea. Machiavelli approved it, of course. Leonardo even designed a giant dredge to accomplish what was then impossible, and his scheme might have worked if the Arno hadn't flooded in the process. The Arno River plan, like so many of Leonardo's ideas, remains simply a sketch in a notebook. Among his writings, these words are often found: "Tell me if anything was ever done." 500 years later, an amazing amount of what Leonardo envisioned is part of our everyday lives. He had a design for a diving suit made of waterproof leather with a large expandable pocket filled with air. The submarine is another marvel of the modern world. 500 years before this sleek warship was built, Leonardo envisioned a primitive precursor. Fearing that it would be put to military purposes, Leonardo destroyed all but his most primitive sketches.
He himself says that he will not publish, not make known his invention because of the evil nature of man, because they would use that to bring about death at sea.
7 years ago,
Graham Hawkes designs underwater vehicles for exploration, beginning, like Leonardo, with sketches in a notebook.
I think that if he were here today, looking at what we're doing and the way we're doing it, I think he would just be completely at home, understand exactly the way we're thinking. And when you look at his sketches and his designs, you can see that same thought process. I think of Leonardo as an engineer. To me, he was a great engineer.
Graham Huck's submersible, launched in 1984, opened up a new world unattainable to Leonardo.
The normal view underwater of pretty coral and sunlight is just this top skin. Once you get beneath there, light starts fading. It goes from light blue to a deep blue to an indigo, and then to blackness. And everything you see, every time you come near the bottom, you can be quite sure that no human being's ever been there before.
Now Graham Hawkes wants to go even deeper. His latest project is called Deep Flight. Looking like an airplane, it's designed to fly down through the water.
Now, the interesting thing here is that submarines and submersibles for the last 500 years, if you start with Leonardo, have been blowing water out and sucking water in, making themselves buoyant and heavy and sinking up and down. And the departure here with this machine, 500 years later, finally we're going to throw all that away. The machine stays positively buoyant. That is, if it stops, it always floats to the surface. And then to dive, we need to build up some speed on the surface, like an airplane on a runway. And then when we have a minimum speed, this wing will develop the downforce to take us down, and then we put the nose down and fly down and literally fly around underwater. Now that's a departure from Leonardo's submarines designs, but the interesting thing is exactly where he was with his winged flight. He would have understood this perfectly.
Leonardo was fascinated with the properties of both water and air, but he was above all most obsessed with the notion of
flight, I would say. And to the point that he's envisioning actually the piloting, the maneuvering over the clouds, wind turbulence, and he says, you do this, you do that.
It was from this mountain that the stone and marble was quarried to build the city of Florence, which was founded 2,000 years ago. And it was from here, half a millennium ago, that Leonardo da Vinci experimented with his designs for flight. He would approach the cliff, toss out his model, and study its glide as it danced with the wind on the way down. Something like this.
He understood perfectly the mechanism of the adjustment of the wings and the birds in taking advantage of wind currents. He had a very precise notion of what a glider should be.
Leonardo had a design for a parachute as well, a cloth-covered tent which would enable a man to throw himself down from any great height without harm. He got the right idea with the shape, although the size of the chute would have been too small for a safe landing. It's unknown whether Leonardo's parachute was ever tested, but he did advise trying it first over water. Leonardo's notebooks are filled with his observations of the movements of birds. His greatest dream was to find a way for man to fly. He wanted this to be his lasting legacy. He wrote,
"The first flight of the great bird from the summit of Mount Chechery will fill the universe with wonder. All writing will be full of its fame, bringing eternal glory to the place of its origin."
In the 1980s, a team of 40 from MIT spent 3 years and almost $1 million designing a human-powered plane to fly the same course as the mythical Daedalus, 72 miles across the Aegean Sea. The MIT group accomplished what Leonardo could not.
He was limited by the materials of the day, as well as the fact that he was really starting at the very beginning of this line of thinking that leads you into successful airplanes. But he's obviously been an inspiration to many of the people who followed in the path that he sort of blazed.
Aeronautical engineer John Langford and his colleagues are now working on a project based on what they learned from Daedalus. Their new plane, named the Perseus, is the first aircraft ever designed solely for scientific research, to test the Earth's atmosphere at very high altitudes. There is no pilot on board the plane.
You go from Daedalus, where the human was not only the pilot but also the engine, now into Perseus, where the human is at first glance completely out of the picture. The cockpit that it has is on the ground. Looks like a couple of desktop computers, which are actually now replace the traditional cockpit that you are used to thinking of in a manned aircraft. Leonardo could walk into this hangar and feel right at home, and I think there's a great continuity of thinking and of the sort of human spirit that goes as far back as anybody's able to trace it, and hopefully will continue far into the future.
One of our obsessions in common with Leonardo is flying machines. The bipedal ornithopter runs on 2 legs, flaps its wings, takes off, flies around. His work with flying machines was grandiose in the sense that it was several hundred years ahead of its time. And, we feel the same way about our work trying to build an android. That may be 400 years ahead of its time. Nevertheless, we're going to give it a good shot. So we feel very much akin to Leonardo in that respect.
Deep in the heart of Texas, a group of artists and computer engineers get together to create and design artificial life. They call themselves the Robot Group, and they combine the best and the brightest in art and technology. David Santos calls himself a technology artist.
The world has become a much more complex place, and that's why the Robot Group collectively can represent the spirit of Leonardo. But individually, it's very hard for someone to master all these disciplines which today are so rich and evolved.
One of the unique things about our group is the combination of art and technology. And a lot of people seem to think that that's an odd mix, that those don't go together. And I always try to challenge them. If you could ask Leonardo da Vinci, whether art and technology go together, what would he say? And he would just, of course, tell you, well, sure, they go together. Things are much better when they do.
Glenn Curry designs computer software.
Well, Leonardo was also the first modern hacker. If Leonardo were alive today, he'd be hacking robots, hopefully with the robot group.
There are little sketches of Leonardo, unquestionably pertaining to a robot. In addition to that, there is also the very famous story of the mechanical lion that he built for the King of France, you know.
The anecdote goes that for a state visit by the King of France to Florence, Leonardo prepared an automata, a lion, that walked out to the king and it presented some lilies.
He just got so much out of life, and just knowing something about his life and a number of things that he looked into, the number of things he taught himself, is just inspiring, and people will always be able to use inspiration.
Leonardo spent his last 3 years in France under the patronage of King Francis I. His chateau was just a short distance from the royal residence, and the king is said to have enjoyed Leonardo's conversation almost daily. Leonardo died on May 2nd, 1519, at the age of 67. The entry in the register of St. Florentines at Amboise reads simply,
In the cloister of this church was buried Monsieur Leonardo da Vinci, noble Milanese, first painter, engineer, and architect of the king, state mechanist, and sometime director of painting of the Duke of Milan.
One thing that is still missing, as I keep saying, is really Leonardo the man. Leonardo deep inside, this mystery. And I think it's also something that it's precisely what keeps us going in terms of looking after him. And maybe there will be future generations doing the very same thing. And it's not a sense of frustration, of course, that one meets with, you know. It's this challenge, this enigma.
Leonardo for me remains my idol, just as others idolize soccer players or race car drivers. Leonardo, for me, is the greatest. He's the greatest.
El máximo.